Hi, my name is Anna Balabina. I'm a law school student from Ukrainian Catholic University, Lviv, Ukraine, and senior correspondent at JURIST. I'm working on articles about Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine and also about issues which are ongoing in European Union. Also, I'm doing some sort of other stuff, but I think you can find it all on my LinkedIn, where I'm kindly inviting you. Year 2022 is coming to an end. And not gonna lie, it was a challenge. It's popular to do some sort of recap of the things which were ongoing in the world during the past year. So what do we have? Russian war against Ukraine in February and still ongoing. Autocrat Viktor Orban consolidated its hold on Hungary in the April's election. Marine Le Pen, National Assembly tripled in its numbers in the French Assembly in the June. Italy's election of September resulted into a right-wing coalition government led by two pro-Russian parties and one far-right national party. Altogether, we have the thing in the world which is called crisis, and unfortunately, not only political. European Union always seemed to be the island of democracy on the Eurasian continent, but recently, world decided to challenge the unity of the members of European Union. Therefore, I prepared this series of interviews with high-level representatives from European Union. And today we're going to talk with Secretary General of European Parliament, Klaus Welle. But to make this interview more interesting, I need to transfer myself to Brussels. Good evening, everyone, once again, and here we are together with Mr. Klaus Welle. Thank you once again for finding time for us. And as we all know, the beginning of 2022 showed the world that, in general, democracy itself might be really challenged. And the most horrible event of 2022 is, of course, Russian war against Ukraine, which is still ongoing. And we Ukrainians are really grateful for EU to helping us in financial, refugee, and every support, especially military ones. But what we were observing from the beginning is that probably was some sort of disconnection between member states when it came to really concluding a decision which was needed at that point. For instance, when it came to banning Russia from SWIFT, France, Germany, Hungary, and other countries didn't agree at some point. How was it happening from the inside, and what really changed the approach of member states?
My own evaluation is that the decisions were taken extremely quickly. We had the first decision, I think, after 2 days on Ukraine, quite far-reaching sanctions. So my surprise was rather there. Member states will always have discussions, and they have different points of interest. So for me, that's not so surprising. The surprising thing is that the European Union could take the lead and that decisions were taken so quickly, and consequential decisions in the sense that sanctions packages were passed that haven't been passed on any other country around the world ever.
Interesting. But also, as we can see, we have such an interesting, so to say, player, Hungary, which doesn't have, as we now can observe, its government does not really have the democratic values itself. And this one country can really block the whole decision. How is EU going to probably in the future deal in this matter? Because more and more states want to become members of European Union.
The danger is, of course, there, but at the end of the day, Hungary did not block the decisions. Sometimes it led to some delays because also sometimes interests are a little bit different. It makes, for example, a difference whether you are a landlocked country or whether you're not a landlocked country. If you're not a landlocked country, you can react much more quickly because you can have, like Germany, LNG portals. If you're a country like the Czech Republic or even Hungary, you don't have this possibility. So there are objective interests which are different. Of course, we, the European Parliament, we've always believed that those decisions should be taken by qualified majority and not anonymity. because anonymity gives too much possibilities to any single country in those discussions.
Yes, and about this type of decision making we're having right now, everybody understands that today this decision is against Hungarian interests, tomorrow it might be against German interests, and in order to change this approach to making decisions, every member state, as I recall, need to agree to that. What are the plans of European Union in this direction? How are you going to deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, first I think it has to be clarified that 90% plus of the decisions in the European Union are already taken with qualified majority. The member states have reserved some for anonymity where they feel they're especially sensitive for them. But we recently had a huge convention with citizens' participation, Council, Commission and the European Parliament, where the recommendations also from the citizens are to overcome this. We have three baskets: issues that can be solved by simple legislation, issues where a so-called passerelle could be activated, which means the member states decide unanimously that those issues are no longer under anonymity, but they can be decided by qualified majority, or as a third option, treaty change. So I expect that all the measures proposed on legislative base, they can be taken in the next legislature. And there is a chance that the passerelles can be activated still in this legislature. If not, then we have to go to more far-reaching treaty change.
You mentioned about the citizens and their recommendations, initiatives. I'm not an EU expert yet, but in the future, probably citizens are going to influence more of the decision-making process in EU. Or what are the perspectives on that?
The interesting thing with the citizens panels was that they basically recommended what Parliament has been recommending for a very long time, which also has its logic because Parliament is elected by the citizens. So we are regularly adapting to what citizens believe in different member states. So in fact, it was not so much that they delivered something very new, but that they strengthened the role of the European Parliament and to a certain extent the national parliaments in this process. So in this sense, this has been useful. Nevertheless, we have to be also careful to not overuse such an instrument. Parliaments are there because they can challenge executives and governments in a professional way. And we don't want to go back to situations where, let's say, executives have weaker assemblies in front of them that they can more easily control themselves.
Interesting, and also about, so to say, it's going to become probably in the future more and more citizens of European Union because more and more member states are really willing to become a member state of EU. And what I've heard from the outside, so to say, people believe that sometimes it's probably be better to have not exactly the way of country really becoming a member state. Instead of that, probably concluding some sort of treaties which make country closer to European Union, but in order to save, so to say, EU, which is was, maybe not all the countries should be accepted, so to say, because some people are talking about, what's your opinion on that, what's better for European Union, to really accept more and more states, or really something like closed treaties about economy or something else would be better?
I believe the European Union has been profiting from its past enlargements, not only to the north, to the south, but also to the east. Of course, we still have some issues left from the last enlargement round, especially issues of the rule of law, in some cases also going beyond that, and the partial non-recognition of the supremacy of EU law, which is absolutely crucial if you want to keep up that community of law. So I think it's important that these issues are ironed out and that we then can progress the process of enlargement, because enlargement was meant for the very first moment, from the very first moment, for all European Union countries under the condition that they fulfill the necessary requirements.
And with regards to for rule of law, for instance, we still see that, let's be honest, in East Europe, there are still some issues when it comes to rule of law in some countries. and how EU is going to deal with it, because sometimes, again, I'm sorry for Hungarians right now, but we're going to mention Hungary again right now, the autocracy there, so to say, it really the government acts against rule of law. And still, even as I recall from the news, EU tried to block some funds coming to Hungary, and it still at some point didn't help. What EU is going to do with such countries, probably where they are really not willing sometimes?
I personally believe that those tools really helped advance the issue. Hungary has largely delivered on paper. I think there are very few who are putting into question that there was serious progress, let's say on paper. But what is important is that also there is serious progress in practice. And that needs, let's say, a little, let's say, more convincing that things are not just sorted out on paper or have progressed on paper, but that they're also happening in practice. And I think that's where we are right now. I believe that the argument of the European Union was correct, convincing, and has also shown results that we cannot use EU funds in environments where the spending of that money is not secure.
It's quite an interesting, the last point with regards of money which is going to be spent not secure. Ukraine, for instance, and its Euro integration was a hot topic for a long time in Ukraine, and finally we candidates to become the member state of EU. But still we have the problems such as corruption and as well rule of law, not gonna lie. And in general, everybody knows, I think, that it's going to take a lot of years to become a member state for Ukraine. But what are the crucial points to become the member state of European Union with regard to Ukraine?
I think that Ukraine in this sense is having similar problems than other countries in Central Eastern Europe had, but of course it's a big country. It's a very big country, which doesn't make it easier, rather more difficult. I mean, the positive thing in the case of Ukraine is that Ukraine has demonstrated that it's willing to fight for the perspective of EU membership and to change for the perspective of EU membership. And a lot of this fighting spirit will also be needed once the war is over and hopefully won, to adapt the internal functioning, so address those issues as the rule of law, corruption, and so on. Because at the end, these are the critical issues. In many areas you can adapt, but this is something where I think all the 27 member states will insist that there's still a lot of progress necessary, and that this progress has to be made. So Ukraine also has to be realistic in the sense, once the war is won, the war is won, but there are still very serious reforms to be conducted. I've been working with President Jerzy Buzek, was President of the European Parliament, but earlier on he was Prime Minister in Poland, and he had to conduct the most serious economic and social reforms in Poland to prepare Poland for the way towards the European Union. And at the end of those reforms, his party was not re-elected into parliament, not only not into government, but not into parliament. So these politicians were ready to pay a very heavy price to open the way towards the European Union. And we see that Poland is largely profiting from this nowadays. So that means that after the war is won, Ukraine still has a long and hard way to go to have serious reforms, to fulfill all the standards. But that's exactly the future Ukraine has been opting for. So I'm also optimistic that can be done.
And about the war, when the war is going to be, when in general we already see how many damage Russia brought to Ukraine, and this damages will need, of course, money, and of course we hope that countries are going to help Ukraine to really rebuild its system from the very beginning, so to say. But in general, what EU can expect in reply from Ukraine? Because we are quite hardworking people. We have really good soils and a lot of other good stuff, not only rich culture. But what can EU really demand, probably in reply from helping us all this time with financial support during the war and after it?
I think beyond any specifics, as long as Ukraine is a sovereign, independent state, Western and Central Europe are safe. And that's quite a lot.